Hello, and welcome to Haunted Slumber. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I always enjoy reading them. If you enjoy slow, haunting stories that gently carry you into the quiet hours of the night, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Now, get comfortable. Let your body sink into stillness and allow the sounds of the outside world to slowly fade into silence. Tonight, as your eyes grow heavy, the darkness begins to whisper, and a haunting tale quietly comes to life. So close your eyes, listen carefully, and let sleep guide you into haunted slumber. Story 1. A soft tapping on the rain fly pulled me out of sleep. At first, I did not even open my eyes all the way. I was deep in that strange place between sleep and waking, where every sound feels far away and nothing makes sense yet. The tapping came again, light and careful, like tiny fingers brushing the top of the tent. My first thought was that it had to be a small animal. Maybe a mouse or a chipmunk had climbed onto the tent roof. Maybe it was the beginning of a mountain rain, the soft first drops before the storm came down for real. I blinked in the dark, closed my eyes again, then opened them once more. It made no difference. The inside of the tent was black. Not dim, not shadowy. Black, the kind of darkness that feels thick, like it has weight. The tapping stopped. I turned slightly in my sleeping bag, ready to go back to sleep. I remember being annoyed more than afraid at first. We had hiked hard that day, and I was tired enough to sleep through almost anything. Jack was beside me in his own bag, breathing slowly, dead asleep. Outside the tent, the mountains were silent. Then, the door of the tent ripped open. The sound of nylon tearing cut through the dark so suddenly that my body froze before my mind understood what had happened. It was not a small tear. It was a violent ripping sound, like something had grabbed the fabric with both hands and pulled it apart. Jack woke with a choking gasp. What the? He never finished. I felt his sleeping bag rub hard against mine. I felt him twist in panic inside it, still half trapped in sleep and fabric. Then he was pulled away from me, not crawling, not stumbling. Pulled, his bag scraped across the tent floor. His shoulder hit my side. Then his body slammed through the torn opening and disappeared into the night. Ennis. He screamed. His voice was full of panic, but also confusion, like he had woken up inside a nightmare and still expected the world to become normal again. He screamed my name again, but the second time it broke into something wordless. I heard dried grass crackling. I heard rocks shifting. I heard him being dragged away. Then his voice faded into the darkness. I sat up so fast that I almost trapped myself in my own sleeping bag. My hands flew across the floor of the tent, searching for a headlamp, a flashlight, anything. My fingers found only empty space, the edge of Jack's sleeping pad, and the warmth where his body had been only seconds before. "Jack?" I tried to shout, but my voice came out thin and useless. Outside, he screamed again. No. No. This time, he was fully awake. There was no confusion in his voice anymore. Only fear. Pure, sharp fear. Then he screamed in a way I still hear every day. I do not know how to describe it without sounding like I am trying too hard. But that sound has never left me. It comes back in quiet rooms. It comes back when I am half asleep. It slips into normal sounds, into my alarm clock in the morning, the seatbelt warning in my car, the low sound a streaming app makes when a show ends, even my manager's voice when he is disappointed in me. Something in my mind always bends those sounds until they become Jack's scream again. It started high, full of terror. Then it changed. It dropped lower, turning from fear into pain. It became wet and broken. Less human, more like some animal being torn apart. Then I heard something ripping. Not fabric this time, something heavier. Then everything went silent. The sudden quiet was worse than the screaming. The night outside became calm again, almost peaceful, as if nothing had happened. The wind did not rise. The trees did not shake. No animal cried out. The whole mountain seemed unaware of what had just taken place. Or worse, completely uncaring. I sat there in the dark, unable to move. My lungs were pulling in thin mountain air in short, fast breaths. My heart was beating so hard that I could hear it in my ears. I tried to hold my breath, tried to force the pounding inside my skull to quiet down, because I needed to hear something. Anything. Jack moving, Jack breathing, Jack calling out. Footsteps, branches, the thing that had taken him. But there was nothing. Jack? I whispered. It barely made it out of my throat. Then something answered from the direction where Jack had been dragged. Ha ha! It was playful. Mocking. The sound was close enough to be clear, but not close enough for me to tell exactly where it came from. It was a laugh, but wrong. Not loud, not natural. It sounded like someone pretending to laugh because they knew laughter was supposed to mean something, but they did not really understand it. Hey, I started. Before I could say anything else, I heard a sharp hiss of air. Something flew toward me through the torn opening. It hit me lightly in the chest. I panicked. My legs kicked inside the sleeping bag. My mind filled with images of spiders, bats, snakes, something rabid, something with teeth. I thrashed so hard the zipper of the bag burst open. I kicked and twisted, trying to get free, my hands slapping at my chest in the dark. Then it happened again. Hiss, thwack, something struck my forehead. It was light, but sharp around the edges. It bounced off and landed somewhere in the tent. Ha ha! The laugh came again from outside. Hiss, thwack. Another small thing hit my chest. The laugh came after it, this time turning into a quiet giggle somewhere out in the dark. The object rolled into my lap. I grabbed it with both hands, ready to crush it or throw it away before it could bite or sting me. My fingers closed around something hard, rough, and familiar. A pine cone, for a second. That confused me more than anything else could have. My hands turned it over and over. I felt the ridges, the little sharp tips, the dry folded scales. Someone was throwing pine cones at me. Jack? I shouted. This isn't funny. My voice shook badly. Fear and confusion were twisting together inside my chest. Part of me wanted to believe this was some horrible prank. That Jack was outside laughing because he had somehow managed to scare me worse than anyone ever had. I wanted that to be true, even though I had heard his scream, even though I knew what I had heard. The answer came back in loud, rolling laughter. It sounded like someone laughing so hard they could barely breathe. I dropped the pine cone and started searching for a light again. I crawled on my hands and knees through the wreck of the tent, feeling through my ruined sleeping bag, my pack, my boots, and loose clothing. My hands shook so badly that I kept missing things. I could not understand how the headlamp had disappeared. I had put it somewhere near my head before going to sleep. I was sure of it. Then, something heavier flew into the tent. It hit my shoulder with a wet slap and dropped against my hand. It was too heavy for a pine cone, too soft, too warm in some places and already cooling in others. Without thinking, I grabbed it. My fingers wrapped around fingers, human fingers. For one terrible moment, my mind refused to understand. I felt the shape of a hand, a thumb, a palm, a wrist, wet skin. The rubber wedding ring Jack always wore because he did not like hiking with his real one. Then my fingers touched exposed muscle and broken bone. Jack, oh God, Jack's hand. The laughter outside exploded into wild, breathless joy. Something inside me snapped. I threw the hand away, scrambled to my feet, and rushed through the torn opening of the tent. I did not have a light. I could not see where I was going. I only knew the laughter was in front of me, and my fear turned into something hotter for half a second. Rage, maybe, or madness. I ran toward it. The night was impossibly dark. There was no moon, no stars, no pale outline of the ridgeline. Nothing. The world outside the tent was so black it felt like I had run into a wall made of darkness. Still, I kept going, barefoot, half-dressed. Blind rocks cut into my feet. Sticks snapped beneath me. Branches from subalpine firs slapped my face and arms. I tripped over roots and stumbled through small holes in the ground. The laughter kept moving ahead of me, always just far enough away that I could not reach it. Laughing, mocking me. Every time I thought I was close, it shifted farther off. It echoed between the trees, bouncing through the dark until I could not tell if it was in front of me, behind me, or all around me. I remember thinking, why is it so dark? It was not normal darkness. I had spent nights in the mountains before. Even without a bright moon, there should have been starlight. There should have been some shape to the world, some difference between ground and sky, but there was nothing. It was like someone had thrown a blanket over the entire mountain. The ground began to slope down. I felt it under my feet too late. One step landed wrong, and my legs slipped out from under me. I fell hard, rolled, and tumbled down the slope. Rocks tore at my skin. Dirt filled my mouth. My shoulder struck something solid, then my hip, then my back. I tried to grab anything, but my hands only clawed loose soil and roots. The laughter followed me down. Ha 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 ha. It rolled with me, rising and falling, full of delight. I finally slammed into the base of a large Douglas fir. The impact knocked the air from my lungs. For a while I could only lie there with my mouth open, trying to breathe and failing. My whole body hurt. My feet felt shredded. My arms and back burned from cuts and scrapes. Dirt was pressed into my skin. My ribs ached with every tiny breath. And then the laughter stopped. The silence returned. But this time, the darkness changed. At first, I thought I was losing consciousness. The blackness around me began to thin. Slowly, stars appeared above me, one by one, like tiny holes opening in a curtain. Then the moon came back, cold and pale behind the trees. The shapes of the forest appeared around me. Trunks, branches, rocks, the slope I had fallen down. Far below, I could see dark ridges layered across the horizon. The world came back as if a sheet had been pulled away. Then I heard the normal sounds of night again. Crickets, a soft breeze, leaves moving, something small shifting in the brush far away. It was peaceful. That was the worst part. Everything looked peaceful. I do not remember much after that. I must have moved. I must have kept walking, because elk hunters found me the next morning almost 10 miles from our camp. I was barefoot, wearing only my boxers, dehydrated, shaking, and weak from blood loss. My feet were badly cut. My skin was torn in dozens of places. I was half out of my mind, and I was still holding Jack's hand. I do not remember picking it back up. They told me later that I would not let go of it. Not when they wrapped me in a jacket. Not when they gave me water. Not when they called for help. I kept trying to explain, but I could not make the words come out right. I kept saying Jack's name. I kept saying something had laughed. I kept saying the stars disappeared. The search team found our camp. They found the ripped tent. They found blood. They found signs that something had dragged Jack away, but not far enough to make sense of what happened. There were no clear tracks. No bear prints. No mountain lion prints. No clean trail. Just broken grass, disturbed rocks, and pieces of Jack that I try not to think about. They never found the rest of him. People asked me questions for months. Rangers, police, therapists, Jack's family, my own family. Everyone wanted the story to become something they could understand. An animal attack, a mental break, a prank gone wrong, a fall, a nightmare mixed with trauma. But there was no answer that fit everything. No animal threw pine cones. No animal laughed. No animal made the sky disappear. For a long time, I could not sleep without medication. Even with pills, I would wake up sweating, hearing nylon rip in the dark. I drank too much. I missed work. I stopped camping, stopped hiking, stopped answering calls from people who cared about me because they all sounded too gentle, too careful, like they were speaking to someone already broken. Maybe I was broken. Maybe I still am. But something strange has started happening lately. The more I tell the story, the easier it gets. That should be a good thing. That is what therapy is supposed to do, right? You tell the story until it loses power. You drag it into daylight until it becomes just a memory. Only that is not what this feels like. It does not feel lighter. It feels funnier. The first time I laughed, it scared me. I was talking about Jack's scream, and before I could stop myself, a little laugh slipped out. It was small, almost nothing. I covered it with a cough and told myself it was nerves. Then it happened again. And again. Now, sometimes, when I remember Jack calling my name, I feel something rise in my chest that is not grief, not fear, something warm and bright and awful. I think about the pine cones hitting me in the dark. I think about how confused I was. I think about Jack's hand landing beside me like the punchline to a joke I did not understand yet. And I laugh. I know how that sounds. I know it makes me sound sick. Maybe I am. Maybe whatever was out there did not just take Jack. Maybe it left something behind in me. Maybe it crawled into the space where fear used to be and turned it into something else. Because the more I tell people what happened, the more I hear that laugh in my own throat. Jack's final scream used to haunt me. Now, sometimes, when the room is quiet and I am alone, I think back on it and smile. Not because it was funny. Of course not. It was horrible. It was the worst thing I have ever heard. But still, every now and then I remember the way his voice broke in the dark, and I feel my mouth pull open. And then I laugh. Story 2. I keep hearing things when I'm in the shower, and I'm starting to think I'm losing my mind. To explain this properly, you need to know where I live. My apartment is small, old, and badly maintained. The whole building feels like it is one strong storm away from giving up. The floors creak even when no one is walking on them. The walls pop and crack when the temperature changes. In winter, the pipes make horrible screaming sounds in the middle of the night, like someone is dragging heavy furniture through the walls. After living there for a while, you stop asking questions. Strange sounds become part of the place. You hear a bang from upstairs and tell yourself it is just the pipes. You hear footsteps outside your door and tell yourself it is a neighbor. You hear the walls groan and tell yourself the building is settling. That is why I ignored it the first time. I had just come home from a long shift at work. My body was tired, my head was heavy, and all I wanted was a hot shower. I dropped my bag, kicked off my shoes, and went straight to the bathroom. The warm water hit my shoulders, and for the first few minutes, I felt myself finally relax. Then, through the steady hiss of the shower, I heard a sound. It was a long, slow creak, metal against metal. It sounded exactly like my front door opening. I froze under the water. At first, I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe one of my neighbors had come home. The walls in that building were so thin that I could usually hear people moving around in the apartments beside mine. Sometimes sounds traveled strangely through the hallway. Maybe someone else's door had opened, and the water made it sound closer than it was. Then I heard another sound. Footsteps. Slow, soft footsteps. They sounded like bare feet crossing the floor. They moved with a careful rhythm, not fast, not rushed, just slow and steady, as if someone had stepped inside my apartment and was taking their time. I reached out and turned off the water. The bathroom went silent. "Hello?" I called. Nothing answered. No footsteps, no creak, no shifting floorboards. Not even the low groan of the building settling. For a few seconds, I stood there dripping wet, listening as hard as I could. My heart was beating fast enough that I could hear it in my ears. Then I started to feel stupid. If someone really had broken in, standing naked in the shower was not going to help me. So I stepped out, grabbed a towel, and wrapped it around myself. I dried off as fast as I could, pulled on a t-shirt and sweatpants, and slowly opened the bathroom door. The apartment was empty. I checked the living room first, half expecting to find someone sitting on my couch. There was no one there. The kitchen was empty too. I checked my bedroom, then the closet, then under the bed, even though no grown adult could have fit there comfortably. I checked the bathroom again, just in case I had somehow missed something. Nothing. The place was completely empty. Then I checked the front door. The deadbolt was locked. The chain was still in place. There was no way anyone could have opened that door from the outside. No one could have come in. No one could have left. I stood there staring at it, feeling a cold, strange discomfort settle in my stomach. If someone had entered my apartment, they had not come through the front door. And they had not left through it either. I was ready to blame the whole thing on the terrible acoustics of the building when something near the entryway caught my eye. A small ceramic bowl was sitting on the floor. It was lying on its side near the wall, as if someone had placed it there or knocked it down and left it. I frowned and picked it up. The bowl was beige, chipped around the rim, and ugly in a boring kind of way. It had been in the apartment when I moved in. I never used it for anything important, but I also never threw it away. Most of the time, it sat on my coffee table and held my keys. I carried it back to the coffee table and set it down where it belonged. Guess the ghost came back for his bowl, I muttered. I even smiled when I said it. Looking back, I wish I had taken that joke more seriously. I checked the windows after that. Every one of them was closed. The cheap little latches were still locked. There were no scratches on the frames, no signs that anyone had forced their way inside. Eventually, I laughed at myself. It was not a happy laugh. It was the kind of laugh you let out when you are embarrassed by your own fear. I had worked a 10-hour shift. I had skipped lunch. I had come home tired and gone straight into a hot shower. My body was exhausted. My brain was probably filling in blanks. The building was old, the walls were thin, and running water could twist sound in weird ways. Most likely, I had heard one of my neighbors come home. That explanation was good enough for me. By the next evening, I had almost forgotten the whole thing. My routine was exactly the same. I came home from work, threw my keys and bag onto the couch, and went straight into the bathroom. I turned on the shower, waited for the water to get warm, then stepped in. For a few minutes, everything was peaceful. The heat loosened the ache in my shoulders and legs. Steam filled the bathroom. I closed my eyes and let myself relax. Then, I heard it again. The slow groan of metal. My front door. My eyes opened. I stood there for a moment, water running down my face, and let out a tired breath. "Nope," I said out loud. "I am not going out there." Part of me hoped that whatever was outside the bathroom had heard me. A second later, the footsteps started. They were faster this time. Bare feet moved from the front door area into the kitchen. One step, then another, then another. I do not know why I did it, but I reached for the faucet and turned the shower off. The moment the water stopped, everything went silent. There were no fading footsteps, no movement, no sound of someone running away, just silence. I waited for 30 seconds, then a minute, then 5. At last I stepped out, dried myself, got dressed and searched the apartment again. I opened every door. I looked under every piece of furniture. I checked the windows, the locks, the closet, the bathroom, and even the kitchen cabinets. No one was there. Everything was exactly where I had left it, except for the bowl. It was sitting in the middle of the hallway now, several feet from the coffee table. I stared at it for a long time. Then I said, I really need more sleep. I picked up the bowl and put it back on the table, but that night, I barely slept at all. I could explain the sound of the door opening. I could explain the footsteps if I really tried. But the bowl was different. There was no good reason for it to be in the hallway. Nothing I came up with made sense. By morning, I had almost talked myself out of being scared. Maybe I had kicked it without noticing. Maybe I had moved it while cleaning a few days earlier and only thought it had been on the coffee table. Memory is strange. People misremember small things all the time. Still, something about it bothered me. Not enough to make me fully believe my apartment was haunted, but enough that I wanted proof. I wanted to prove to myself that nothing was happening. So after work that evening, I ran a little experiment. I came home, went into the bathroom, turned the shower on full blast, and left it running. Then I went into my bedroom and hid. I stood there quietly, listening. 1 minute passed. Then 2. Then 3. Nothing happened. No creaking metal, no footsteps, no doors opening, no bowl moving. Only the sound of water hitting porcelain. See? I whispered to myself, "You're just losing it." I felt ridiculous for even thinking something was wrong. I walked back into the bathroom and turned the water off. That should have settled everything. It did not. The next day, I had to stay late at work finishing paperwork I had been avoiding all week. By the time I finally clocked out, I was already 20 minutes late for a date. I had been looking forward to that date for days. The last thing I wanted was to spend the evening standing in my bathroom, wondering whether my apartment had developed a mind of its own. So when I got home, I tried not to think about it. I threw my bag onto the couch, pulled off my work clothes, and jumped into the shower. I did not think about the experiment. I did not think about the bowl. Not until I heard it. The front door. That same slow groan of metal. Then the footsteps. Bare feet crossing the floor. One after another. I swore under my breath. Not tonight. I reached out and turned off the water. Silence. My phone buzzed on the bathroom counter, and I nearly jumped out of my skin. Every instinct in me told me not to look away from the door, but I forced myself to turn and grab it. 2 messages were waiting. Running late? Everything okay? It could not have taken more than 2 seconds to read them. I quickly typed, "Sorry, be there soon." Then I placed the phone back on the counter. When I looked up, the bathroom door was open. Not all the way, only 3 or 4 inches, but I knew it had not been open before. I stared at the narrow gap and tried to convince myself I had forgotten to close it properly. The building was old, the hinges were uneven. Doors drifted sometimes. Maybe the air pressure from the shower had pulled it open. Maybe there was some normal explanation. The hallway beyond the door was lit by the lamp in my living room. Warm yellow light cut through the gap and fell across the bathroom floor. I stood there, dripping wet and afraid, staring at that thin strip of light, waiting. I did not know what I expected. Maybe I expected the door to move again. Maybe I expected a face to appear in the crack. Instead, something shifted just beyond the opening. It was only there for a moment, a pale flicker. Thin, quick, gone before my eyes could focus on it. Then I heard a switch snap. Click. The hallway light went out. Darkness swallowed the gap. For a second, all I could hear was the shower still running. My hand found the faucet almost by itself, and I twisted it shut. Silence. The bathroom door was closed again. I do not remember getting dressed. Not clearly. I remember pulling clothes on with shaking hands and refusing to look away from the door for more than a second at a time. I remember grabbing my phone, my keys, and my bag. I remember leaving the apartment so quickly that I did not check the bowl. The rest of the night almost felt normal. My date noticed I was quiet, but I blamed it on work. He did not push. We had dinner. We talked. I answered when I needed to, smiled when I was supposed to, and tried to act like I was not thinking about my apartment, about the bathroom, about the door. After dinner, we went back to his place. On any other night, I probably would have been excited. That night, I was just relieved not to be going home. Eventually, I fell asleep there, fully dressed, curled on the edge of his bed while he scrolled on his phone beside me. At some point, he turned off the lamp. I remember thinking I should get up, go home, and sleep in my own bed. But I could not make myself face that apartment again. When I woke up the next morning, sunlight was coming through the blinds. For a few seconds, everything felt normal. Then I remembered where I was. My phone was dead on the floor beside the bed. My date was still asleep, breathing slowly beside me. I sat up carefully, trying not to wake him, and began piecing together the night before. For one brief moment, I almost convinced myself that everything that had happened in my apartment was stress, lack of sleep, a bad week. Maybe I had imagined the footsteps. Maybe the door had opened on its own. Maybe the light had gone out because the old bulb finally died. Then I saw something on the nightstand beside the bed. A small ceramic bowl, beige, chipped along the rim, sitting perfectly upright in the morning light. Story 3. I know this is probably a desperate shot in the dark. I have already tried to look into the property myself, and I found almost nothing useful. Still, I have to ask someone. I have to put this somewhere before I lose the courage, or before whatever is happening to me gets worse. The place is called the Macris Abattoir. An abattoir is a slaughterhouse, if you do not know. Around here, it is one of the few abandoned properties that no one seems to have a clear story about. Most old ruins in my area can be traced back to something. A family that moved away and let the place rot. A house fire. Some old farm that closed when the last owner died. But the Macris Abattoir is different. It feels older than the information about it. Everyone remembers it being abandoned. That is the strange part. Some of the older people in town say it was still working when they were children, back in the late 1940s or early 1950s, depending on who is telling the story. But no one agrees on who ran it. Some say it belonged to an odd Polish immigrant family. Some say it was run by a very strict Catholic family. Others say it was only one old man, cutting meat alone inside those walls like some keeper of a lighthouse made of flesh. No one can tell me for sure. Like most places with no clear history, rumors grew around it. Anything bad that happened nearby eventually got tied to that building. A child went missing. People whispered about Macris. A dog disappeared. It must have wandered too close to the old slaughterhouse. People claimed they heard the old meat saws still running in the middle of the night, even though the place had no power. Kids said blood still ran under the doors when it rained, but there was never much proof. The only case I found that seemed at least partly real involved a 7-year-old boy named Kennedy. He went missing for 2 days and was later found on the property. When police asked him what happened, he said he had been sleeping in his room when he woke up and saw a big pink monster. He claimed it swallowed him whole, carried him around for days, and then vomited him up inside the old abattoir. The police said he had probably been kidnapped. They found him inside a pig carcass in one of the old stunning rooms. The animal's mouth had been stretched open and badly torn, like someone had forced it wider than it should ever go. They never found a suspect. Lately, the Macris Abattoir became a dare for local teenagers. People would challenge each other to walk into the woods, find the ruins, disturb the old butchery, and take a meat hook as a souvenir. Of course, when someone dangled a rusty meat hook in front of my face and dared me to get one for myself, I refused to back down. That is how I ended up sneaking into the woods one winter night, wearing several layers to keep the cold from reaching my bones. The ruins were about a half-hour walk from my house. The path sloped down into a deep gully, and as I walked, I felt like I was descending into the throat of the earth. My flashlight shook in my hand and bounced over the ground, barely lighting the brambles and bushes I had to push aside. The woods were too quiet. My feet crunched over twigs and dead leaves, but nothing else moved. No owls, no wind in the branches, no small animals running through the brush. It reminded me of being in the ocean, where there are no fish, only the feeling that something far away is watching you from beyond the dark water. About 15 minutes into the walk, I heard a strange noise in the distance. It was high-pitched and sharp, like metal being dragged against metal. The sound rose and fell in a way that hurt my ears. It reminded me of something being cut apart while it was still alive. I froze. The sound stopped after only a few seconds. That should have been enough to make me turn around. I wish I had. But at the time, I told myself it was just some animal noise. Woods are full of strange sounds at night. I forced myself to keep going. By the time I reached the abattoir, that sound already felt like a bad memory. The building was much bigger than I expected. It looked more like an abandoned warehouse than a slaughterhouse. Rust and vines climbed the walls, making it look like a huge scab rising out of a wound in the earth. On the side of the building, the words McChris Abattoir were still visible in plain industrial letters. Beside the name was a cartoon pig holding up a cleaver. A plate had been painted in the middle of its neck, making it look like the pig was serving its own head. The pig's teeth were human-looking and still strangely white after all those years. I shivered and walked around to the front. That was when I noticed how few doors the building had. There was one in the back and one in the front. No side doors, no loading doors. No large sliding doors where trucks could bring animals in or take meat out. Then I realized something else. There was no road leading to the building. Before I could think too hard about that, I heard the screech again from the woods behind me. It sounded quieter this time, but not farther away. Then came the crunch of leaves and sticks under something heavy, still far off, but closer than I wanted. My excuses stopped feeling strong. Fear pushed me forward, and I went inside. The smell hit me first. It was sweet and rotten at the same time, like fruit left out too long, mixed with mold, old blood, and dead animals. It smelled like every piece of roadkill I had ever passed had been thrown into a pile and covered with expired honey. I gagged and lifted my jacket sleeve over my mouth. The first room looked like a lobby. Old chairs were scattered around, some piled against a window that looked into an office. Beside the window was a rusted metal door. A sign above it read, "Processing floor." Next to the door, the same cartoon pig had been painted on the wall. Someone had graffitied its eyes into pentagrams and drawn a large curled mustache over its mouth. A speech bubble beside it had been changed. I could still see the faded remains of the old words, "the best meat in town," but someone had painted over them with, "We are Legion." By then, I was properly scared and disgusted. I wanted the dare to be over as fast as possible. I opened the door to the processing floor. To my surprise, it led into a simple hallway. Sheet metal covered the walls and ceiling, and the floor was bare concrete. It looked like a chute, the kind used to force animals deeper into a facility. Dried blood stained the concrete in old dark streaks running down the middle of the hall. Flies moved over the floor, rubbing their tiny legs together and leaving white eggs in the cracks. As I made my way deeper inside, I crouched to look at one of them. It pressed its mouth to the concrete like it was trying to suck the memory of blood from the stone. A gust of wind shifted the building, and the walls seemed to breathe. The door at the end of the hallway opened into the plant itself. A metal walkway ran above a series of divided rooms, probably so workers could look down and watch each stage of the butchering process. I stepped onto the walkway. The metal rang under my weight with a dull, weak sound, like it had not been touched in decades. I looked down into the first room. It looked like a cleaning area. A large table sat in the center. Behind it, an old poster showed cuts of meat from a cow, a pig, and a lamb. But the paper had peeled and warped over time, twisting the animal shapes into something strange and wrong. I kept walking. Then my foot landed on a section of walkway that was more damaged than I realized. The metal screamed. It bent under me. Then it collapsed. For one terrifying second, my hands caught the railing, but the railing was so rusted and sharp that it cut deep into my palms. My skin tore open as I tried to hold on. The metal bit into me like barbed wire. I cried out as my hands struggled to grip it. Rusted shards dug deeper. One piece scraped against the bone in my palm. My feet kicked uselessly beneath me as I tried to pull myself back up. As I hung there dizzy and panicked, the whole plant seemed to bend inward around me. The walls looked like they were folding toward me, like a giant trap closing on prey. I could not tell if it was my fear, my pain, or the building itself shifting like a funhouse mirror. Then, my grip failed. The torn skin of my hands peeled away against the railing, and I fell. I do not know how far I dropped, or how long I was unconscious. When I woke, my head ached, and my ankle burned with sharp, pulsing pain. I was in total darkness. I scrambled for my flashlight, but my hand touched something soft and cold instead. It felt like meat left out too long, damp, slightly sticky, and wrong. Whatever it was gave under my fingers with a wet sound, and something from it soaked into the open wounds in my hand. I recoiled and searched faster, panic rising in my chest. At last, my fingers found the flashlight. It clicked on. My injured hand screamed as I forced it to grip the handle. The first thing the beam showed me was the ceiling. Above me was a rusted metal hatch surrounded by sheets of metal. It was shut tight. Then I turned the light toward the thing I had touched. 3 dead pigs lay in a messy pile. Flies moved across their skin. The smell returned all at once, stronger than before, pressing through the sleeve I held over my mouth. I pushed myself against the wall and tried to stand. When I put weight on my bad ankle, pain shot up my leg so hard I almost fell again. I looked around. I was in another hallway, similar to the first one, but deeper underground. A thought came to me before I could stop it. Kill chute. That was what it felt like. A chute where animals were led to die. A passage angled just enough to make your head bow before the hammer came down. I pushed the thought away and tried to reach the hatch, but there was no handle, no latch, no way to pry it open. It was far too heavy for me to push with my injured ankle. With no way back up, I pointed the flashlight down the hallway. It seemed to stretch as far as the light could reach, bending and splitting into different paths. I turned around and saw the same thing behind me. I felt like a rat in a maze, except there was no reward at the end, only death. With no other choice, I started walking. The tunnel split again and again. Left and right paths opened at random, each one lined with metal sheets and bare concrete. Old blood covered some sections, dried black and gray with age. Other patches were fresh, red, wet, and shining, still steaming like the life had only just left them. Some parts of the walls looked moist. They dripped slowly, like there was muscle behind the metal sheets, pumping with some unholy life. The air was hot and thick. It smelled of rot, blood, and old fat. Every breath felt like swallowing decay. Pig carcasses were everywhere. Some were piled in corners. Some were ripped open. Some hung from meat hooks in the ceiling. I tried counting them at first, but I stopped after 100. There was no point. Then I turned a corner and found a huge pile of pig bodies blocking part of the hallway. They were packed so tightly together that I could barely tell where one ended and the next began. That was when I saw the shoe. It stuck out of the pile. A Nike sneaker, wet with humidity and rot. Above it were the lower part of a calf and an ankle. A human leg. I do not know why I pulled the shoe off. Curiosity, maybe. Shock does strange things to you. At the end of the human leg was a hoof. It was too large and deformed. It did not look like a clean animal hoof. It looked like many small bones had been melted or forced together into the shape of one. The surface was blackened and cracked. I dropped the shoe and kept walking. A dull shock took over me. I could not think clearly anymore. From the moment I fell into that chute, I felt like my death had already been decided. It is hard to explain, but I no longer felt like a person. I felt like meat. Like every roll of muscle, fat, and nerve inside me could be removed with surprising ease. Like my body was only a stack of pieces, and if enough were pulled away, whatever made me human would fall apart. I rounded another corner and saw a pig lying alone in the center of the floor. Unlike the others, it had not been thrown onto a pile or hung from a hook. Its stomach had been ripped open, and its ribs pointed outward like a broken crown. On the wall beside it, written in old dry blood, were the words, "I am not a pig." There were other people down here, I thought. Then, somewhere in the distance, metal clanged against metal. Or there still are. As I moved toward the sound, lights flicked on in the tunnels. One row after another, the fluorescent bulbs came alive with a cold electric buzz. When they passed me, I finally saw myself properly. My hands were torn badly. Deep cuts ran across both palms. One gash stretched up toward the tip of my left index finger. My ankle was swollen and bent wrong. Even standing still made it throb. I ripped strips from my jacket sleeves and wrapped my hands as best I could, trying to stop the bleeding and keep the filth out. There was almost nothing I could do for my ankle. Bloody, hurt, and shaking, I kept moving. It felt like hours, maybe days. Time stopped working down there. My hands shook constantly, and my foot hurt so badly that my vision rippled with every step. Eventually, exhaustion pulled me toward sleep. I found a small pile of discarded clothes, mostly flannel and jeans, and curled against them like an abandoned animal. The tears came easily. I felt powerless. I felt useless. I felt like nothing more than the meat on my bones. I thought I would never see anyone I loved again. I thought I would never see the sun again. That was one of my last thoughts before I fell asleep. Sleep was nothing, just a black gap full of pain. I woke when something tugged at my pants. My eyes opened slowly. The hot air burned my throat, and dried mucus crusted my eyes and nose. Two green eyes stared up at me. A pig was chewing on my pants. I kicked it in panic, forgetting my injuries. My bad foot struck its face, and pain exploded up my body. I let out a sound almost like the pig's squeal. The animal shook its head and bit into my leg. Its teeth felt small but strong, grinding into my calf with horrible force. I grabbed my flashlight and smashed it into the pig's skull. Again, it refused to let go. One of its eyes burst under the blows. The lens of my flashlight cracked, and pieces of glass cut into its pink flesh. By the time I finally made it release me, it had torn a chunk from my leg. The pig squealed and shook its head. The sound almost sounded like words. Meat, meat, meat. I hit it one more time, and it finally ran. I stood there gasping, barely able to breathe. Then my stomach growled. It was a deep, raw hunger, the kind I had not felt since childhood. An empty command from inside my body telling me to eat whatever I could find. I tore more cloth from my sleeve and wrapped my leg. My body felt like it was coming apart. Cold sweat covered me. My hands would not stop shaking. Without a working flashlight, I had to stay near the parts of the tunnel where the overhead lights still worked. When the lights went out in sequence, creating a sudden artificial night, I would crawl against a wall or hide inside a pile of pig bodies until they came back on. Sometimes they stayed off for a long time. Then I was left in the rotten darkness until the lights finally returned, or until I forced myself to crawl blind toward another lit area. The pigs became a constant danger. I saw at least one every day, usually eating from a pile of meat. If I stayed away from their meals, they usually left me alone. But I always feared one would take another bite from me while I slept, or that a group of them would trap me. Sometimes I heard them stampeding down distant halls, chasing something, or being chased. I wandered hungry, injured, and hopeless. I never found an open hatch. I never found stairs. I never found an exit. I tried to memorize strange things, hoping something might help me later. On one wall, someone had scratched the words, "They are unclean." On another, "They all taste the same." Another said, "Don't go into the dark." Another was only one word repeated again and again. Man-pigman pigman. I figured out what had scratched the words when I saw bloody fingernails still stuck in the metal. Piles of clothes were everywhere. I guessed people had stripped them off because of the unbearable heat. Some clothes were tied into bandages. Some were soaked in old blood. Some had marks like prison tallies. I found an old trench coat that reached my ankles. Inside, from the collar to the bottom hem, someone had carved tally marks. 517. You could be down here for years, I thought. You would never run out of meat. That thought made my stomach twist with hunger. I cursed myself for not eating before leaving home. I cursed the dare. I cursed my pride. After what I think was 3 days, my hunger became almost unbearable. I turned into another hallway and found fresh words written in pig's blood on the wall. 3 left turns. There I am. My starving brain struggled to understand what it meant. Then I heard a sound. Nails against metal. Or something harder than nails. I turned back down the hallway. At the edge of the darkness, where the overhead bulbs had burned out, I saw 2 hands gripping a metal sheet. They were dirty and bloody. The nails were long as knives. It looked like someone was crouched at the edge of the dark, ready to run. Then I saw part of a face, a long, wrinkled snout, 2 large nostrils leaking mucus, empty eye sockets hidden in shadow. I ran. I ran until the clean metal sheets turned rusted, and the fluorescent lights gave way to pale halogen bulbs. The tunnels became thick with corpses, stacked so high I had to crawl over them on my stomach. Sometimes the piles reached almost to the ceiling. I heard more footsteps in the dark. Some sounded human. Some sounded like hooves striking steel. Sometimes I heard wet cutting sounds, followed by chewing. My hunger made me delirious. My steps became weak shuffles. I had no plan anymore. At last I collapsed beside a pile of bodies. The air was even hotter there, like an oven. Heat shimmered from the metal walls. Flies buzzed everywhere. I was so hungry. You cannot understand that kind of hunger unless you have felt it. It was not just wanting food. It was a hole inside me. A black pit demanding to be filled. It felt like I could eat forever and never be satisfied. There was a fresh body on top of the pile, still warm. I do not want to write this part, but I have to. I bit into the pink flesh and tore. The meat came away hot and soft. It was sweet and salty and rotten all at once. It slid down my throat too easily. I took another bite, then another. I tore into muscle, fat, and veins. I drank blood because my body wanted it. I ripped into organs until my face and hands were covered. Then I pulled out the heart. I knew it was not a pig's heart. I do not know how I knew, but I did. It was too large, too strange, too full of thick tubes. The only thing that was not different was the taste. That is the worst part. It tasted the same. No, not the same. Better, it was sweet and rich and terrible. It made me hate myself even as I kept eating. I never want to see that meat again, but I know deep in my bones that if someone put it in front of me, I would devour it. I ate until I was full. Then I ate more. Then I vomited. Then I ate again. When I finally stood, I felt drunk with relief. The hallway was still hot. I was still trapped. My body was still damaged. But I was full. After that, I wandered in a kind of daze. The metal walls eventually became wooden planks that bent under my weight. Blood and bile had soaked into the wood, and every step squeezed something wet from it. It felt like I was walking through the inside of a throat. The tunnels sloped downward at uncomfortable angles. Sometimes they were so steep that I had to brace myself against the walls. More than once, I heard a pig squeal behind me and saw it slide past into the dark below. The layout stopped making sense. Corners looped back on themselves. Walls jutted out at wrong angles. Pig carcasses filled passages so thickly that blood squelched under my feet. Then I began hearing a new sound. It was somewhere between spiders running across the floor and horses galloping. Fast, much faster than anything else down there. Whenever the pigs heard it, they panicked. If that thing caught them, the squealing lasted only a few seconds. Then came the sound of bodies being torn apart, bones cracking, flesh being stripped away. Every time I heard it coming, I crawled under the nearest pile of corpses and stayed completely still. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would give me away. Sometimes, when the thing came close, I heard it whispering. Not one voice, several voices. Morning comes, O son of Nazareth, cast me flesh, 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 tastes just the same. Empty pit, never full. Sometimes it whispered my name in the voice of a crying piglet. If I hid under only one or two bodies, I sometimes saw pieces of it. A huge, swollen shadow, long jointed legs, many mouths breathing, snorting, squealing, and whispering. Thick drops of spit fell from it and shone in the dim light. For something so monstrous, it moved with terrible grace, quick and precise, like a machine or an insect. Sometimes, if I tried to leave my hiding place too early, the sound would stop. Then it would rush back toward me so fast it seemed to fly. Still, I ate. I kept eating. Whenever I had enough time near a pile of meat, I would eat until my stomach hurt, empty myself, and then eat more. I began rubbing grease and torn skin over my own body without even fully understanding why. I wanted more of it. I wanted to smell like it, to taste like it. I barely noticed the changes at first. The scabs on my skin became rough and pink. Tiny thick hairs grew through them. My broken ankle changed shape, making my heel feel taller. My body felt wrong, but I was too hungry to care. One night, when I had gone too long without finding fresh meat, I crawled through the dark on my hands and knees, sniffing the air. I caught the smell of rot a few turns away and giggled with excitement. Small, snorting sounds came out of me as I followed it. Then, I saw light. Sunlight. It poured down through an open hatch. Below the hatch was a pile of pig bodies, stacked almost like a staircase. For a moment, joy rushed through me. I could climb out. I could take some meat with me. I could leave. Then I saw the marks on the bodies. Hoof dents. All over them. Some were fresh and still wet with blood. A tiny, panicked voice inside my mind screamed, "Get out! Get out now!" But I forced myself to stay still. I crawled into the pile of bodies and hid. A moment later, the spider hoof sound thundered down the hallway from the direction I had come. It had been waiting. It stopped above me. I could not see it, buried under pale meat and dead weight, but I felt it. Its body pressed down on the pile, crushing everything beneath it. The pressure was so strong I felt my shoulder blade pop slowly out of place. I held back a scream. I waited. At last, the thing moved away, maybe chasing something else. With the last of my strength, I crawled out from under the corpses. Crying with relief, I climbed the pile and pulled myself through the open hatch. It was the same hatch I had fallen through. Above me, the broken walkway hung like dead branches. I laughed. I laughed as I crawled out of that ruined slaughterhouse. I laughed while my shoulder screamed with pain. I laughed all the way home, until I collapsed into bed and started writing this. Does anyone know anything about the McChris abattoir? Anything about the McChris family? Anything at all? I am desperate. Really desperate. I have started hearing voices in my empty house. Some sound far away. Some whisper right beside my ears. They tell me to go back. They tell me I only need a little more food. Sometimes I hear my mother's voice calling me to dinner from deep inside the gully. Even my thoughts do not feel like mine anymore. I keep having strange urges. I crawl on the floor without meaning to. I scream and do not remember why. Sometimes I lose time and wake up to find raw bacon torn apart around me, my hands sticky with grease. When I look in the mirror, I do not always see a human face looking back. I am so hungry. I know what the meat really is, but it tastes just the same. Story 4. That was what our course mate told us after school, at least. I did not know her very well. We had worked together on one project, and she had been nice enough, reliable enough too. Honestly, she had done most of the difficult work while the rest of us survived by pretending to be useful. I still felt a little guilty about that, so when she came to us after class and asked for help with something supernatural, I did not know what to say. Why us, of all people? I remember asking. What have we done to deserve your trust? Allie, who was standing beside me with her school bag hanging from one shoulder, looked at our coursemate with clear suspicion. There are 2 supernatural clubs in this school, she said. You could always ask them. Our coursemate blinked like the idea had never crossed her mind. Her hand went to the golden amulet around her neck, and she held it so tightly her fingers turned pale. I don't know, she said quietly. My heart told me to ask you. That was not exactly the kind of answer that made me feel better. Still, 2 days later, Allie and I hailed a car and went to her apartment. She lived in an ordinary apartment building on the other side of town. The outside walls were stained with moss and mildew, and the old paint had cracked in long, thin lines. A security guard sat near the gate, completely focused on a soccer game playing on a small screen. He did not even notice us until I called out to him. When he finally looked up and opened the gate, I found myself thinking that at least he looked human. Akemi isn't coming with us after all, Allie said as we stepped out of the car. She's busy with club work, I replied. She is their treasurer, remember? At least she gave us tools. Shame, Allie said. I would have appreciated the help. Our course mate was already waiting in the lobby. She looked pale and tired, though not in the way I expected. If someone told you they were being haunted, you would imagine dark circles under their eyes, red veins, trembling hands, maybe even that gray look people get when they have not slept properly for days. She did look scared, but her face was still oddly smooth. Too smooth, maybe. Her eyes were clear. Her posture was careful. The amulets I carried under my shirt began to grow warm, which told me something in the building was wrong. Allie pinched my arm the moment she saw her. I hissed and rubbed the spot. What was that for? I'll tell you later, Allie whispered. Her eyes were shining, not in a poetic way. I mean, they actually flashed with light for a split second. What is it that you can't say now? I asked. Before she could answer, our course mate waved us over. Al. I'm so glad you came. It has gotten worse since last time. We followed her into an old elevator that shook when it started moving. As it rose, she began explaining everything. It had started about 4 years earlier. Whenever she sat alone, something appeared near her. At first, it was only the smallest flicker, almost too quick to notice. A face in the corner of her vision, a shape in a reflection. Something standing behind her for less than a second. It was brief enough that she wondered if she had imagined it. But every time it appeared, she felt a strange ache in her chest. Not fear, at least not at first. More like a missing piece clicking into place for one moment before being pulled away again. Please do not start stories like that, Allie said suddenly. I just sat down. I stared at her. Allie, I'm serious, she said, almost raising her voice. That is not a comfortable beginning. Our course mate kept talking as if she was used to strange reactions. She said she had not told anyone at first. She went to temples. She bought amulets. She tried prayers, charms, and advice from people who claimed they knew how to deal with spirits. She did not tell her parents because she did not want to frighten them. She thought maybe it was stress, maybe exhaustion, maybe something to do with the car crash that had happened a few weeks before the first appearance. The way she said car crash bothered me. There was no tremble in her voice, no pause, no sign that it hurt to remember. Well, I said carefully, we certainly needed that cheerful detail considering where we are going. Allie glanced at me. If you want to say something dark, please do not use other people as the punchline. I decided to shut up. Our course mate said the thing never faded. It became clearer over time. After a while, she realized what the face looked like. It looked like her own face, but covered in blood and grime, with an expression so full of sorrow that she could barely stand to look at it. At that point, she stopped talking and took a folded paper from her bag. On it, she had written a full description of what had been happening to her. Allie, for reasons only Allie could understand, suddenly said, 2 truths and 1 lie. My bedroom wallpaper is pink, I was shot in the face once, and my favorite book is The Martian. I blinked. Wait, it cannot be the obvious one, can it? What do you mean you were shot in the face? Answer the question. Our course mate looked between us like she was beginning to regret asking for help. According to the written paper, the spirit had first spoken about 2 years earlier. The voice was faint at first, almost buried under static, but over time it became clear. "You stole my life," it said. "Your wallpaper," I said. Allie turned toward me. "Tell me how you figured that out." The elevator doors opened before I could answer. Her apartment was a reasonable size. There was a living room, a dining table, a small kitchen, and a couple of bedrooms. It was not dirty, but it felt strange. The ceiling had stains in one corner. The dining table was cracked, and several religious charms hung near the doors and windows. Her room was the strangest part. Instead of a normal bed, there was something that looked like a cryopod or medical sleep chamber. It was smooth, white, and stamped with the symbol of a globe. Inside it sat a well-loved teddy bear. The thing looked expensive, medical, and not meant for a teenage student's bedroom. The moment we stepped inside, my amulets heated again. Allie was too busy looking around to notice, or maybe she noticed and pretended not to. Our course mate explained that she technically lived with her parents, but they were usually out working. They would be back the next day for the weekend. She sounded relieved about that. "Good," she said. "No need to make them worry." I stared at her. "Have you never told them?" "No," she said quickly. "Again, I don't want my parents to worry. It's not something they can deal with anyway." That answer made no sense to me. We were two random students she barely knew. What were we supposed to do that her own parents could not? "Please tell me you are paying us," Allie said. Our course mate bowed her head. "Mom and Dad don't really check my finances. Pick a number, I suppose. I am not writing down how much we asked for. It is already strange enough that I am telling this story at all." A few minutes later, Allie excused herself and dragged me into another room. She shut the door behind us. "She is not human," Allie said. I looked at her. "An android, I presume. The sad thing is, my life has become strange enough that I simply accepted that sentence." "Should we be discussing this here?" I whispered. She could be listening. "Perception filters," Allie said, opening storage cabinets as if she owned the place. "I have always disliked them. They use valuable processing power and keep causing breakdowns." I stared at her. "I have no idea what you are talking about." "It should be obvious," she said. "The pod is used for charging. Her face is too unblemished. The electricity usage in this apartment is much too high for one person. And her writing is too consistent, even for a talented human. How did you even notice all that?" Allie sighed at me like I was slow. "I should cut your arm and see if there is blood in your veins." "No need for that," I said quickly. "Please do not say things like that so easily." But she was right. It explained a lot. The way our course mate spoke about the crash without emotion, the strange bed, the smooth face, the way her eyes never looked as tired as the rest of her. Still, it raised a bigger question. If she is not the real her, I asked, then who is the spirit? Why can't they make peace with each other? Allie leaned against the cabinet and thought for a moment. Perhaps the real girl died and came back hoping to see her parents one last time, only to find they had bought a replacement. As for why they are separate beings, usually this should not happen. She stood and walked toward the door, holding a paper she had found. "Let us not tell her yet. I do not wish to explain things." Before we returned to the others, I noticed a fridge magnet stuck to a cabinet. It was shaped like a mangosteen, badly glued together. Some fragments were still missing. It might have just fallen and broken one day, but something told me to pick it up. The moment my fingers touched it, I saw something. "My home," a voice said. The spirit floated near the ceiling, her shape flickering like an old television image. Below her, our course mate stood in confusion and fear. Then, something tore her apart. Wires sparked. Coolant spilled. Her body split in a way no human body could. I shoved the magnet into my pocket and pulled Allie aside. "In the name of whatever is above," I whispered, "how are we supposed to deal with this?" I told her what I had seen. Allie clutched her head. "Oh, what do you mean, oh?" She looked toward the dining room, where our course mate sat at the table reading a thick novel. Still, it would not do well for her to know too much at once. Our course mate looked up and waved tiredly. "So, how do you plan to take care of that thing? It tried to throw me off my chair yesterday." Allie stared at her. "You did not cry out when that happened?" "It has not really done anything too bad," she said. "It tried to scare me a couple of times. That is all." I did not know whether that was a self-esteem problem or a self-preservation problem. Neither answer was good. I pointed out that my amulets only reacted strongly in her room. If the spirit was attached to any place, it seemed to be there. Of course the spirit would stay there. It was her room, too. I reached for a paper talisman. The room shifted. "You knew," the spirit cried. A black mark burned onto the wall beside our course mate. The air became heavy and sharp. "You knew and you still came to remove me? Why? Because I make her less normal? She is not normal. Why does she get to act like me? Why does she get to live my life?" Our course mate flinched and looked around, but she clearly could not understand all of it. There had to be a solution. There had to be. But I could not see one. The android did not know why the spirit hated her. The spirit believed her life had been stolen. We knew the truth, or part of it. But did we have the right to tell her? Did I have the courage to? A little later, we were back in her room. Allie decided that I should speak to the spirit alone. She let our course mate out, saying I needed to focus. The door clicked shut behind them. I took out a talisman and waved it with as much dignity as I could manage. Swiftly, to my command, I said, feeling ridiculous. The spirit appeared in front of me, flickering like a dying screen. "I'm not going to harm you," she said. "Take off the amulets. They burn." I hesitated. I did not want to hurt her. There was also the practical fear that if I pushed too hard, she might attack all of us. So I removed my amulet and placed it, along with the talismans, on a chair. The spirit immediately became clearer. She looked about 15, which made sense in the worst possible way. Her face was the same as our course mates, but dirtier, sadder, and more human. Blood stained her hairline. Her eyes held a pain that did not belong on someone so young. "Why are you here?" she asked. "You barely know her." "Someone needed help," I said. "Who else was going to come? You could have hired an exorcist. They would get rid of the ghost, and everything would be fine. You would not have to care what I had to say." "Why would you think I would not care?" I asked. Maybe I am naive, but last month I tried to talk down someone who tried to kill me. So please, tell me why you are here. You have just met me and you already want my backstory? Please correct me if I am wrong, I began. I heard you and your friend talking in the storage room. She said quickly, "Inhuman, she is inhuman." Inhuman, almost as if... I stopped myself. That is not the point. The spirit sighed. The sound gave me goosebumps. Perhaps you want to know why I have not reincarnated yet. I nodded. She became very serious. I had not finished my favorite novel when I died. I stared at her. Anyone would have been silent, though maybe for different reasons. The underworld just let you stay here for 4 years because you wanted to finish a book? The characters were almost alive, she insisted. They were written so well. I was rooting for this one pair, and there were only 2 chapters left. Their story still had no conclusion. I could not just leave. Was it, by any chance, the book she is reading in the dining room? The spirit looked away. My replacement kept reading it even after I made her fall off the chair. But the book was right there. 4 years was more than enough time to finish 2 chapters. They got married, if that is what you wanted to know, she said. The first thing the replacement asked for after waking up was the novel. That explained the original reason she had stayed. And it also made clear what, or who, had kept her here after that. She noticed my expression changing. My parents were grieving, she said. I wanted to hug them. I wanted to cry. I told them I loved them before going out, but that was not enough. It could never be enough. She told me what happened after the crash. A man who looked like a nurse walked toward her parents. White clothes, professional face, calm voice. She did not know what a transference case was. She did not know why he said her cooling body still had a nearly intact cerebrum. Transference case, I muttered. Allie had talked about that once when she was bored during recess. It was a term used for androids whose personalities and memories were patterned from the brain waves of real people, usually people who had died. Organ donation needs consent, I said slowly. So how was this legal? Do you know where the man came from? He said something about restoring my family and benefiting their research. Then he gave them a business card. It had a globe printed on it. I went to the door and called Allison. I think I know why she asked for you. The door opened, and Allie walked in, taking deep breaths. Please stay back, I said. It might be dangerous. Allie looked at the spirit and then at me. Let me guess. Global mechanics. It is a small world after all. The spirit frowned. Could you explain? As you can see, I do not have hands to flip through papers. In short, Allie said, global mechanics was founded by a vile man whose own daughter had to run away from him. That same vile man decided to mail his daughter a prototype android for reasons I still do not fully understand. She paused. You are looking at her right now. The spirit stared at Allie. Do you think? He was probably just a company functionary, Allie said. You were, for lack of a better word, a test subject. The spirit looked down. I know I should not hate my parents. They were desperate. They wanted their daughter back. But I am here. The girl reading in the living room is not me. They cannot just pretend nothing happened. I wanted to answer, but there was no good answer. Instead, I somehow said the least delicate thing possible. Please tell me more about throwing people off chairs. Allie looked at me. The spirit looked at me. I lifted my hands. Delicately, the spirit did not smile. I was jealous, she said. When I was alive, my parents were barely home. They both worked all the time and took their duties seriously. I spent half my birthdays without them, but now they are always here on weekends for her. It is not her fault for existing, I said. I know. But when I threw a cup at her yesterday, it felt brilliant. Like something built up inside me finally had a way out. When it was over, I felt wrong. Allie looked as if she wanted to scold her, maybe even rant at her. Instead, she took a deep breath. I can understand where you are coming from, Allie said. Sometimes I meet people and immediately want to strangle them. Perhaps they are too strange, or too smug, or perhaps I simply want to. The spirit looked slightly horrified. Did you ever do it? Tell me if you would, if you were me. The spirit went quiet. I felt I had no other options, she said. She had hired someone to deal with me. In movies, exorcists immediately go for the kill. I can barely keep myself together. There was no contest. You were only haunting her before, Allie said. Actually harming her is different. Perhaps you wanted to scare her into calling off the arrangement. Go into her dreams and tell her everything. I doubt she would mind. She is not human. Does she even dream? Well, Allie said, I do. Too late to say anything, the spirit said after a moment. What am I supposed to do now? It is never too late to mend, as people often say, Allie replied. Tell us your reason for doing all this. I want to make her know what she is. I want her to understand she is not me. She never will be me. Only I could be me. You were doomed to fail, Allie said. She literally cannot understand it. She pulled out what looked like a manual and flipped through the pages. I read parts of this to her. Do you know how she responded? She said, Is that not the doctor's instructions? Why do you have that? Then she said she could not have put it in the storage room. Her perception filters are blocking the truth. All of us went silent. Still, the spirit said, I cannot just go. This is still my home. All my memories are here. No one knew what to do. I did not want to open fire and end it by force. I did not want to break someone's mind just to solve a haunting. The spirit would not back down. The android could not understand. We could not leave things as they were. Maybe we could, Allie muttered, then stopped. No, the spirit would never agree. Maybe we should call her parents, I thought. They should be responsible for their own daughter. But what was I supposed to say? Your child is being haunted by her own ghost because she is an android made from the brain waves of your dead daughter? She will be driven mad, Allie said softly. So you just want me out then? The spirit asked. Something inside her will change if she learns too much, Allie said. Perhaps she will never be happy again. I trust you do not want that, since you still seem like a good person at heart. The spirit looked away. No, I do not want that, but I want justice. No, maybe this is only vengeance, but my work here is not done. I cannot pass on yet. The room was heavy with silence. Then there was a wild knocking on the door. Help! I ran toward it. Behind me, Allie grabbed the manual and a screwdriver with frightening speed. I am not a coder, she muttered. Whatever beings are above, help me. I looked back at her. She gave me a look that said, not me this time. I opened the door. Our coursemate stood there with tears in her eyes. Her eyes flashed red in a way that was far too familiar. Explain, she said. Someone please explain. What happened? I asked. Tell me how you realized, Allie said sharply. I don't know, our coursemate cried. I tripped and fell, and my head hurt, and something went zap, and now there are signs everywhere. I can't see clearly. That is your HUD, Allie said. Think to yourself, assign HUD as _off. It worked for me. What are you talking about? Our coursemate said. Then her voice changed, flat and mechanical. Warning. Recognition of unit as android. Action taken. She screamed. Why is my vision like this? I did the only thing I could think of. I hugged her. It is going to be all right, I said, even though I had no idea if that was true. I swear it will be all right." In my arms, she started shaking. Her body spasmed like something inside her was fighting itself. She would realize what she was, then lose the thought, then realize it again. Her memories were being cut, restored, and cut again. Her skin grew hotter under my hands. The spirit stared at her. "Why is she like this? Why is this happening?" Allie flipped through the manual. "I have always hated perception filters." Our course mate's temperature kept rising. "It will be all right," I whispered. "Please hang on." I took out my phone, but I did not know who to call. "Empty," our course mate whispered. "I feel so empty." I held her face and forced her to look at me. "Stay with me. Tell me what you mean." Her eyes were glassy and focused at the same time. Smoke began to rise from near her collar. "Always felt something missing," she said slowly. 4 years ago, never did tell, perhaps it was. Allie suddenly spoke in a clear voice. "Override code 0142 MAII 970. Our course mate went limp. I almost dropped her. "What just happened?" I asked. "Safe mode," Allie said. "Her personality systems are deactivated. She will not respond unless spoken to with either the code or her full name." Allie looked at her closely. "She sees herself as incomplete." "Interesting." The spirit hovered near the wall. "Do you think she is waiting for me?" I did not answer. Allie took out her phone. "I have to call the authorities and ask for instructions." The spirit turned to her. "Why does she not have a soul? What would happen if she did?" Allie paused. The spirit looked at her carefully. "Miss Allison, do you feel complete yourself?" Allie met her gaze. "It does not matter. I stand. My actions have consequences. That is all. Nothing," the spirit said. "I was only curious. But why do you not call my parents? Do they not deserve to know?" "I do not want to explain 4 years of this," Allie said. "Who does? But they are still my parents. I am not responsible. I did not know until today." The spirit's voice softened. "Are you sure you are not just uncomfortable?" I was tempted to put the amulet back on and force the conversation to stop. Instead, I asked for the parents' phone number. "Thank you," Allie said as her phone rang. I stared at my own phone while it called people I did not know. I did not want them to pick up. I wanted them to pick up so this could be over. My finger hovered over the cancel button. Then someone answered. "Hello?" It was her father, probably. I tried to keep my voice steady. "It's about your daughter. I was invited to her place. And what happened?" he asked at once, his voice filled with panic. "Did she trip? Did she fall? Did she—" "Yes," I said. And he cut me off. "Override code 0142 MAII 970. I'll be there in a moment." Then he hung up. The spirit looked around the room. "Am I allowed to explain?" "Wait," I said. "Consent. You forgot to ask his consent before. It can be reversed if they dislike it," Allie said, opening the pod in the bedroom. "But first, if she is awake, that will help us explain what has happened. That is the simplest way I can put what happened next. There had once been a little girl who died in a car crash. Her parents, destroyed by grief, agreed to let a shady robotics company scan her brain and build an android copy of their daughter. Her soul, for reasons none of us fully understood, did not enter the android. Instead, she remained in the apartment, watching a replacement live the life she had lost. Because of terrible design, the android could not handle evidence that she was not human. The moment she truly understood it, Her systems began looping, deleting and rediscovering the same truth over and over, until she nearly burned herself out. Would we have tried to explain everything if that had not happened? I do not know. Maybe we would have been cowards. When our course mate woke, her face was darker than I had ever seen it. She looked at her hands. Then she looked at us. I did not get to hug her that time. Her parents reached her first. Then realization crossed her face. "So I'm not—" "Of course you are," Allie interrupted, "unless you are not here with us right now." Our course mate looked toward the spirit. "I am just a golem, am I not? She is there, I am here, and we are not the same being. That can be changed," the spirit said, "if you want." "Would that not be murder, in a sense?" our course mate asked. "I cannot exactly pass on anyway," the spirit replied. "Maybe this will give me, or us, peace at last. Or perhaps you would receive all of her memories and a new outlook on life," Allie said. Now, about those cursed perception filters, the doorbell rang. A voice called from outside. "Emily, do you need help with the spirit?" The spirit looked at me. "Wait, you hired exorcists anyway?" "I apologize," I shouted, running toward the door. "In my defense, what if you fought us?" When I opened the door, Akemi was standing there with a peachwood sword in one hand and a silver dagger in the other. She had brought a companion. Story 5. When I was younger, my father and I lived on the outskirts of a gloomy town in southeastern India. To the local people, we always looked out of place. We were white, and that alone made us stand out. My family was one of the few that had stayed in India after independence, though I never fully understood the whole story when I was a child. To me, India was simply home. The heat, the rain, the temple bells, the fields, the smell of wet earth after storms, all of it was normal to me. My father was a well-known science teacher at the local convent school. People respected him, even if they still looked at us with curiosity. He was polite, quiet, and strict in that old-fashioned way teachers sometimes are. He rarely raised his voice, but when he spoke, people listened. My early life is mostly a blur now. I do not remember many exact days or clear conversations. The memories I do have feel scattered and faded, like old photographs left too long in the sun. What I remember most is the children. I spent a lot of time with the local kids in our area. Their families treated me kindly, almost like I was one of their own. Their mothers fed me when I came over. Their fathers joked with me. I could enter most of their houses without knocking, and no one would think it was strange. We ran through the fields, played near the temple pond, and wandered the quiet roads between the farms and the town. I remember the feeling of belonging there, even if I did not look like everyone else. There was one boy named Thomas. At least, that is what I have been told. Apparently, Thomas was my friend. My father says we were very close when we were 5 or 6 years old. We threw sand at each other, swam in the temple pond, walked through the paddy fields, and played hide and seek with children who lived closer to town. My father says Thomas followed me everywhere, and I followed him too. He says we fought like brothers and made up 5 minutes later. But that is the problem. I do not remember Thomas at all. Not his face, not his voice, not his house. Not one single clear memory. When my father first told me about him, I thought he was mixing up names. I told him maybe he meant another child. Maybe he was remembering someone from school or one of the boys from the village. But he looked at me like my answer bothered him. Talking to him about it did not help. My mother could not help either. She left us when I was a child. My father almost never spoke about her, and when he did, his voice always changed. My grandfather once told me she had gone insane at some point, but he never explained more than that. Whenever I tried to ask, the conversation was shut down. As I grew older, life became harder, and I stopped asking questions. When I was 17, I moved away to Delhi to work and build a life for myself. My father was getting sicker, and my grandfather's farm was no longer producing enough for all three of us. We needed money. I had no choice but to leave. Now I am 27. I own a small shop in South Delhi. I am married, and until recently, I would have said I was happy. My father and grandfather live with me now, along with my wife, Lydia. She is pregnant with our first child. For the first time in my life, I thought things were finally steady. Then, on a random weekend, my grandfather mentioned him. He was sitting in the living room with a newspaper open across his lap. The fan turned slowly above us, pushing warm air around the room. I was not really paying attention to anything until he lowered the paper and chuckled. Do you remember that Natcat boy from back home? Natcat means naughty in Hindi. I thought he meant one of the young men who used to hang around the forest near his old farm, doing shady things and pretending no one knew. But when I looked confused, my grandfather sat up a little straighter. Thomas, he said, the electrician's son. His eyes searched my face with a strange kind of hope. For a moment, I thought he was glad I did not remember. Or maybe relieved. What? I asked. The moment I heard the name, something moved in my head. It was not like remembering. It was the opposite. It felt like something deep inside my brain was being touched, then pulled away before I could grab it. The harder I tried to think of Thomas, the more distant he became. It was like reaching for an object underwater and watching it sink deeper every time your fingers got close. I tried not to worry about it. About a week later, I heard that one of my childhood friends from my hometown was getting married. We spoke on the phone, and during the conversation, I asked him about Thomas. Him? My friend said, his voice suddenly thin and strange. I heard his parents died in a fire. That was almost 20 years ago. After that, I don't really remember anything about him. I set the phone down and sat there for a while. Then I went to my grandfather and told him what I had heard. He sat up quickly and shook his head. No, he said. Thomas, the plumber's son. I frowned. You said electrician's son. He pressed his lips together. Did I? Yes, he looked away. I can't seem to remember. That did not sit right with me. Then my father's voice came from the other room. Thomas must be that Indian child, the one born to Xavier, right? I heard his rocking chair creak as he stood. A moment later, he came into the room and leaned against the doorframe. Jonas's father, Xavier, was an electrician, he said. He worked at our house. That is how your mother and I introduced him to you. Jonas? I thought the name was Thomas. Or was it Charles? For one sharp second, I was sure the name had always been Charles. Then, the thought slipped away. It was bizarre. It felt as if something was letting us discover him, but only in pieces. Every answer created more confusion. Every memory changed the moment we tried to hold it. If I wanted to understand, there was only one thing I could do. I had to go back to my hometown. I did not discuss it too much with my father or grandfather. I knew what they would say. They would tell me not to worry. They would say it was unnecessary, that childhood memories are strange, that old people mix up names. Maybe they would be right. but my hometown still held many memories for me, even if some of them were blurred. I told myself there was nothing wrong with returning for a few days and looking into one forgotten piece of my childhood. Before leaving, I spoke to Lydia. "You'll take care of the shop," I said, smiling as I touched her hair. "And please take care of yourself too. Rest enough. Eat well. Don't try to do everything alone." She sat in the chair with one hand on her stomach, tired but smiling. "Our child could come any time now," she said. "Are you sure you want to go?" I gave her a small smile and tried to look more confident than I felt. "I'll be back soon." I boarded a train and returned to the town where I had grown up. The local station looked smaller than I remembered. Everything did. The platform, the roads, the shops, even the distant hills seemed to have shrunk with time. I visited our old house first. It had been rented to a small family of 4 with twin boys. They were kind enough to let me stay in a spare room until the wedding. The room faced directly toward my grandfather's old farm. As soon as I arrived, I felt something in the air. Maybe it was only nostalgia. Maybe it was the smell of the soil and the sound of the insects at dusk. But part of me felt sure that Thomas had been real. I told myself he might still be somewhere in town. He might look different now, older and thinner. But if I called his name, maybe he would turn. For 3 days, I asked around. I spoke to old people in town. I visited my grandfather's friends. I contacted people who had known my father. I wrote down every detail I could and called home each night to compare the information with what my father and grandfather remembered. Nothing matched. Some people said Thomas was the electrician's son. Others said plumber. Some said Xavier was his father. Others said Xavier had no children. Some remembered a boy with curly hair. Others said there had never been a child named Thomas in that part of town. The strangest part was the way people reacted before answering. Many of them gave me a weird look, like they were trying to decide whether to speak or shut the door. One old woman asked if I was Abigail's son. Abigail was my mother's name. When I nodded, she went pale and immediately closed the door in my face. That unsettled me, but I tried to explain it away. Maybe my mother's illness had frightened people back then. Maybe she had done things I did not know about. If she really had lost her mind, then it made sense that some people in town remembered her badly. Still, the more I searched, the more I felt like I was walking around the edges of something hidden. After gathering all the details I could, I found one location that came up more often than the rest. A house near the paddy fields, behind a thick line of trees. People did not always agree about who lived there, but the place appeared in enough stories that I felt I had to check it. If Thomas was still around, I thought, maybe he was hiding there. Maybe he had survived the fire and lived quietly off nearby farms. It sounded unlikely, but everything about this already felt unlikely. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to force memories to return. Slowly, faint images floated up. Curly hair, a toothy smile, a boy running across the front lawn, a fight over a toy when I was 9, but the memories would not stay clear. The moment I focused on them, they broke apart. I checked the clock. It was already 1 in the morning. I forced myself to rest, telling myself it would be safer to visit the house in daylight. The next morning, I borrowed a bicycle from the family staying in my old home. They laughed when I admitted I had not ridden one in nearly 10 years. But they let me take it anyway. The road to the house led through fields and pockets of trees. The paddy fields stretched out on both sides, green and wet under the morning sun. As I rode closer, strange little memories began to surface. A front lawn, a game of tag, a boy laughing as he ran from me. Maybe I had known him. Maybe I had simply forgotten. Then I saw the house. It was large, much larger than I expected. 2 stories, with a small front lawn and enough rooms for a big family. Vines and moss covered parts of the walls. The wood was blackened in several places from an old fire. Some sections looked half-burnt, as if the flames had started to eat the house and then stopped before finishing. Maybe Thomas had died there with his parents. Or maybe I would find some clue that proved he had not. I parked the bicycle and walked toward the house. Thomas. I called. The name felt strange in my mouth. I repeated it again and again as I approached, almost like a prayer. I did not want to forget why I was there. I did not want to forget him. Thomas. The forest around the house grew quiet. As I got closer, I felt something like a pulse. It was not a sound exactly. It was more like a vibration in the air, low and soothing, almost gentle. I placed one hand on the front door and pushed. It opened with a long, painful creak. The inside of the house was dark. Not dark in the normal way. It was not simply the absence of light. It felt like the house was swallowing the daylight that entered through the door behind me. I stepped inside and called his name again. That was when I heard it. A slow, painful groan came from below. The sound seemed to rise from the basement. It was flat and lifeless, but full of suffering. It sounded like someone badly wounded, too weak to scream but still desperate enough to make noise. I pulled out my phone and turned on the flashlight. Then I found the stairs and began to descend. The air grew colder with each step. At the bottom, my phone light became useless. The basement was pitch black, and the darkness seemed too thick for the beam to cut through. I placed my hand on the left wall and moved carefully, tracing my way around. A wet stench filled the air. It was dense, sour, and cold, like old water and rotting meat trapped underground. I tried to hold my breath, but could not. I forced myself to breathe through it. Then my fingers found a switch. I flicked it. Someone groaned loudly in the room with me. I jumped back and grabbed a nearby table to steady myself. My heart pounded so hard I could hear it in my ears. A dim light came on. The room slowly appeared, and there he was. A young man stood in the basement, dressed in rags. He was horribly thin, almost too tall for his body. His beard was long and dirty. His skin was pale and dusty, stretched tight over his bones. His lips were dry and cracked. His eyes barely seemed to work. Parts of his skin had open wounds, and for one terrible moment, I thought I could see something inside him that no one should ever see. His nails had grown long on both hands and feet. When the light hit him, he stumbled across the wooden floor, and his nails scraped the boards with a sound that made my teeth ache. Thomas. I yelled, "I'm here to help." Then I saw him clearly. Under the dirt, the beard, and the ruined skin, I saw the boy from my half-memories. The curly hair, the face, the shape of the eyes, Thomas Xavier. In the space of 2 blinks, he stood fully upright. He hunched forward, and his raspy voice filled the basement. You remember, don't you, Ellis? Each word sounded painful. His breath rattled after every sentence, like speaking hurt him. I could not move. If I had not been holding the table, I might have fallen backward. They forget, he whispered. They forget my name, my house. They act like I don't exist. His voice shook and twisted. as if he was trying to remember how to speak, as if it had been years since he had used words. "I can save you, Thomas," I said, though I barely believed my own voice. "Please listen to me, okay?" He did not seem to hear me. His face changed. The sadness slowly left it, replaced by something harder. Then his mouth pulled into a grotesque smile. "Do you remember Abigail?" he asked. I went cold. "Stay back," I said, taking a step away. He stepped forward. "She was supposed to be the forgotten one," he said. "She was the rot, the infected, that witch." His voice cracked and echoed from the deep walls around us. Only then did I realize how large the basement really was. "What?" I whispered. Thomas sank to his knees, sobbing quietly. For a moment he almost looked human again. "She played with us," he said. "With me and you. She took care of me." His knees scraped against the floor. His hands pressed against his head. One day, she disappeared. I missed her, more than my own mother. The words hit something inside me. My mother had slowly been locked away from me too, not physically at first, but in memory. I remembered nights as a child when I tried hard to picture her face and could not. I remembered asking about her and being told not to. I remembered feeling like something inside me was trying to protect me by making me forget. Just like with Thomas, I reached blindly across the table beside me until my hand closed around a tool. I did not look down to see what it was. I could not take my eyes off him. "My parents told me she was a bad woman," Thomas said. "They said she was taken away." He took a deep breath. "Everyone started forgetting her. But I remembered." His voice broke. "I started forgetting too. Ellis, my school, my parents' names, everything except her. It was like she was calling me. She contaminated me." The basement went still. Even the air seemed to vanish. "Stay down," I ordered. "I found her," he said. His voice rose as he said it, becoming high and childlike. "Don't you want to see her, Ellis? Don't you?" He started to stand. I screamed at him to stay where he was, but fear had stolen most of my words. All that came out was a broken shout. Then Thomas turned to his right and laughed. The laugh was so sudden that my heart jumped into my throat. I staggered backward until my back hit the far wall. The stairs were on the other side of him. If I wanted to escape, I would have to run past him. Then I heard a snap to my left. I swung my phone light toward the sound, and I saw her. A skeleton, small and frail, chained to the wall. The bones were held by shackles that stretched to the corners of the room. Pieces of old cloth hung from them. The skull tilted forward as if it had been waiting there for years. Abigail. My mother. Somehow I knew. Thomas's parents and mine had put her there when they realized what was happening. When people around her started forgetting her. When memory itself seemed to rot around her name. They chained her in that basement and tried to keep her forgotten. Then they burned the house and fled, hoping the fire would trap whatever this was underground, far from human contact. But Thomas had come back. Or maybe he had never left. I turned my light back toward him. He was gone. My heart slammed against my ribs. I started moving toward the stairs. The darkness, the smell, the thick air, everything seemed to pull at me. It felt like the basement wanted me to stay, like it wanted to drag me deeper into itself. Behind me, bones snapped in the dark. I did not turn. I tightened my grip on the tool in my hand. It felt like a hammer. I put one foot on the first stair. A heavy, wet thud hit the floor behind me. Then, another. Something was moving toward the stairs. Something large. Something with too many limbs hitting the wood in a galloping rhythm. I rushed upward. Then something grabbed me. A limb wrapped around my leg and yanked hard. I dropped the hammer somewhere ahead of me. I could not tell if the thing holding me was a hand or a foot. It had too many fingers, all digging into me with long nails. I grabbed the railing with one hand and the corner of the wall with the other. The voice behind me boomed from every direction. "Do you remember our first fight, Ellis?" I screamed. I did not want to look back. I knew whatever was behind me was not Thomas anymore. It was not human. "Hold on to your memories tighter," it said. This time it used my father's voice. The sound was so loud it shook through my bones. I thought of Lydia. I thought of our child. I thought of my father and grandfather waiting in Delhi. I thought of how easily I had almost forgotten all of them. If I wanted to live, I had to fight. So I turned. Only a thin strip of daylight from upstairs reached the basement, but it was enough to show me part of the thing holding my leg. It was a hand made of withering flesh, but not one normal hand. Fingers grew from it in wrong places. Some were long, some twisted, some curled backward with nails like hooks. The sight made my stomach twist. I kicked it as hard as I could. It pulled me down another step. I held the railing and fought with everything I had. For minutes that felt like hours, I kicked, clawed, and dragged myself upward while it tried to pull me back into the dark. Then, suddenly, it let go. I did not waste a second. I scrambled upstairs and stumbled into the house. My mind was racing. I looked around wildly and saw a gas cylinder near the kitchen area. I grabbed it, dragged it to the basement door, opened the valve, and shoved it down the stairs into the darkness. Gas hissed into the basement. Something below screamed. The sound was full of pain, but also something else. Relief, maybe. Peace. It sounded young and old at the same time. Empty and full. Dead and alive. I pulled out my lighter. At that moment, the basement door shifted, letting a little light fall inside. I saw its face. Long, pale, empty where the eyes should have been. And yet it was smiling. A wide, painful, toothy grin stretched across its face, as if it had finally done what it came to do. That was when I understood. It wanted to be remembered, even if only by me. I flicked the lighter and threw it into the basement. Then I ran. I threw myself out of the house and into the grass just as the explosion tore through the building. The sound was deafening. Heat pushed over me. Wood shattered. Fire and smoke climbed into the sky. For a long time, I do not know what happened. Maybe I passed out. When I finally moved again, the sun felt lower in the sky. My ears rang. My body ached. I crawled first, then forced myself to stand. I made my way to the bicycle without looking back. I rode away from the house. On the way back, I passed a field of sunflowers. I remembered passing them earlier that morning. But when I reached the road that should have led toward town, something felt wrong. I shook my head and turned the other way. Somehow, I found my way back to the old house where I was staying. The tenant greeted me with confusion all over his face. "We thought the bicycle had been stolen," he said with a nervous laugh, scratching his head. I did not answer. I rushed to my room and started writing this. I do not know what to do. I have searched every corner of the internet, trying to find anything about the thing I saw today. I cannot find any creature or spirit that matches it. Nothing about forgotten people. Nothing about names vanishing from memory. Nothing about a thing that spreads through remembrance and rots the people who hold on too tightly. Every passing minute makes it harder to remember. I keep reading what I have written just to hold the details in place. Thomas, Abigail, the basement, the chained bones, the hand on my leg, the face with no eyes. I need to know if I am safe before I go home to my family. My father, my grandfather, my wife, Lydia. At least, I think her name is Lydia.